wow, I said to myself, Katrina Lindsay, small word indeed. 2 Tony Awards, an Olivier Award, Harry Potter, Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Well, we certainly couldn't miss such a huge opportunity. So here we are. I don't want to eat into Katrina's time. I know you're only here for her, so I won't say more than this. I'll just pass the floor to Robin so he can start his conversation with Katrina. Over to you, Robin.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody, and welcome to my sister. So it's full transparency, she's my sister. Okay, obviously she's here not in capacity of being my sister, but for the body of her work. And I thought today to go through this talk, we'll just have a very informal conversation, and basically we'll cover her life and her work. So give a kind of chronological outlook to, to get a picture of her, and then we'll go into her process as a designer, as a costume designer, as a set designer. And we'll stop for questions from you as possibly as interactive as possible. So Katrina, the first question then really is, was there a kind of a light bulb moment when you realized that you were going to be a designer?
I wouldn't say there was a light bulb moment. I think I always knew that I wanted to go to art college. I was always interested in painting and sort of visual world drawing, painting, ceramics. And so from a very young age, I kind of felt like that would be an area that I would go into art college, but I didn't know anything beyond that. And the thing that I kind of always think back on now when people ask me questions about, the journey that took me to where I'm doing is when we were young, Robin and I, our dad was in the Navy, and we moved around a lot. And so every 2 years we would move to different environments. And one of them was Pozzuoli. So we lived in Pozzuoli for 2.5 years when I was young. So Naples has got a huge link to me and my family. But during that time, I was young and just going to little bits of school. But my parents had these records, the Roger and Hammerstein records of all the musicals. And I didn't understand the language in a lot of the countries that I was in. And I used to spend a lot of time just listening to their records, but also looking at kind of the covers of them, because I think I take information in visually more than verbally. That's kind of how I operate. And I would spend hours and hours kind of looking at these record covers, particularly The King and I, which was a favorite of mine. And I think it was a favorite of mine because it just caught my imagination in terms of the visual of the actual cover. There was some...
Sorry, just interrupt there, Katrina, because I don't know how familiar maybe some of the students are with The King and I. Obviously, you and I are very familiar with it.
Yeah, I don't know.
But you might have an image just to show, maybe. Do you have an image of that?
I do. I mean, this is from the 70s, and it's the album. Oh, no. So, okay, let me just see if I can do this. Do I do that? Oh, no. Hang on. Sorry. Technical. Here we go. Present now. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Hang on. Sorry. Let me do it now. Can you see it?
No.
Oh my gosh, here we go. No, oh, sorry, here we go, that's why. Nearly there, sorry, everybody. Share. Oh. It won't let me share it. Does somebody need to make me host?
I don't know. Do you need to be made host? I'm not sure.
It won't let me share it.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, anyway, you could describe it. Okay, so the album covers, there's Yul Brynner and Deborah Carr. And what was attracting you to that album cover then?
So basically, if no one's seen the film, it's it was
Okay.
Yeah, can you see the album cover?
I see The King and I, but put an image there, okay, of the album cover.
Oh, don't worry.
Okay.
No, it's not that one. This is going to be a bit annoying if we can't share the screen though. So it will basically.
Okay, there we go.
So the one with the big dress, purple dress.
Okay. The one with the purple dress, and there's the
it doesn't matter.
Man standing.
It's not that one. It's the lilac dress. that one.
Oh.
So there was just something about, I'd listen to the music and I would hear, you know, the different songs, but I'd be staring at the album cover. So I spent hours looking at the fabric and the way the light hit the fabric and the kind of sort of beautiful quality of all the different fabrics in this thing. And it just caught my imagination. And, you know, of course, you don't think anything of it at the time. You're kind of, you know, you're a child, you're just absorbed in your imagination. But I think that is something that actually, when I look back at why my journey's kind of come somewhere, is because I spent hours in my imagination, and I spent hours linking the music that I was listening to and the story that I was listening to a visual picture. And the visual picture surrounded around two performers and two actors. And I hadn't seen the film at all then. So I was making everything up in my mind. I hadn't seen the film. And it was later on that I'd seen the film. So, you know, so having spent this kind of childhood of moving around into different environments and kind of finding that I had to go to different schools and learn how to operate with groups of people quite quickly, and also kind of having this anchor in no matter what environment that I was in, where I was, you know, seeing different things, experiencing different ways of living. I also had this anchor of my imagination and storytelling and character. And so I kind of feel like it sort of built up around that, you know, and that's just me looking back at it now that I'm older. I mean, when I was a child, it was just what I did. And I knew that I wanted to go to art college, but I didn't know that there was such a thing as theatre design. I just knew, I thought I'd be a painter or maybe do ceramics. And it wasn't until later on, you know, towards the end of school, that I realized that there was a thing called theatre design.
Okay, I mean, there's a few things that I want to say about that. But what you're just saying there about the kind of the fact that we moved around a lot as children, but you had this constant of this imaginary world, it's very similar to what you do now as an adult, that you go into theater companies, they form for a brief moment, you adapt to them, you collaborate with them, and then they dissolve again. But it's all around a project, an imaginary project, which is the production itself. So there's been this continuity really in your life, your working life, reflecting your sort of biographical background of your early years.
Yeah.
Okay, what I want to touch on, I want to stay in southern Italy to begin with. And we've talked about this, about the impact of living in a very different, not just culture, but climate, and that upon you. And that comes in also into, for example, the work you did on Small Island. So if you want to talk about that, that's just that kind of impact of being in a very different world at a young age.
Yeah, so the places that we lived when we were young, we lived in Malta, and then we lived in Pozzuoli, and then we lived in Cornwall. But when we left, so that my early years were in warm climates, Malta and Naples, and you know, and the quality of light and the fact that you're outdoors more, and just the kind of vivid colors that you see in places that have kind of warm environments. When we left Naples, we spent a year in Glasgow, where my parents come from and where my gran was, and it was, we must have arrived in winter, because all I remember was it was grey. I just remember the greyness of the environment, and it seemed to rain, in my imagination, it seemed to rain all the time. It was a huge shock from, you know, the colours and the outdoor life that I'd had in Italy, to go suddenly to this very grey world where it rained all the time, where you couldn't, even at the playground at school, you couldn't go outside, you were sort of inside. And again, actually, I remember being sort of inside during the play group, and I would be sitting with plasticine, making kind of environments out of plasticine and things like that, because I couldn't go outside to play, and I couldn't, you know, but it was a real shock. And so when I was reading Small Island, and Small Island itself, I don't know how many people know the book, but it's Andrea Levy wrote it, and it's about the British Caribbean experience, and it follows three characters really, two from Jamaica and one who's in Britain, and it's just after the Second World War, and basically it's about the Caribbean characters' aspirations for a different life, for a bigger life than the life that they've been living in Jamaica. And they have these big dreams about what this place, Britain, is going to be like. Britain, obviously, Jamaica was part of the empire, so they felt completely British, but we're living in this Caribbean island. So when the opportunity came for the Windrush generation to go over to Britain just after the war, lots of Caribbean people took it because they felt British. They wanted to go and help rebuild Britain after the war. And one of those people was Andrea Levy's father. So she writes the book from the perspective of the Black British Caribbean family who go to Britain. And then unfortunately, when they get to Britain, they're just completely, all their images of what they believed it was going to be are shattered, because it's a harsh environment. The weather is awful, and it's grey. The environment's grey. London is bomb-ridden still. It's rubble everywhere, and So for me, reading that book and kind of having, the book also is special to me for other reasons in my family. And so it was like, I knew that when I was offered the job, I just thought I've got to really, really felt very connected to that piece. But it really brought back those memories of that journey that I had when I was a child, of leaving this sort of warm place and going to Britain and seeing Britain from an outsider's point of view, seeing it from an outside eye. So that was a sort of, I kind of felt the echoes of that. And I also, in a way, based my design around the sensation of what it is to have a desire and an aspiration of a place, and then how different that is in reality, and how because that's really the journey that the characters had. And there were two lines in the book and the play where Hortense talks about the future, and she says, "In my mind's eye, I see it like this," and that was a clue to me for how to design the space. And also Michael, who gets out Jamaica and kind of gives Hortense the idea to leave, he talks about, you've got to leave this small place, you've got to get out into the world and see wide horizons, wide skies. And I just thought, that's what I want to try and capture. You know, the play itself is written almost like a film script. It's very fluid in the way that it tells its story on stage in real time. So I had to be quick and fluid in the way that we told it visually. So the sense of these big wide horizons, and we use projection to kind of fluidly move in and out of different environments, and then kind of anchored it on the people and the props and stuff around them. So that was, so I think, again, a sort of early experience of mine feeds in very much into the work later on that I'm doing.
So let's go back to your chronological journey that you yourself made. So we were in southern Italy, we go back to Britain, back to Cornwall, then up to Scotland again, and so forth. And then we're in Edinburgh. And then you are accepted down to Central St. Martin's in London, a very prestigious art college, and you do a foundation year. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that experience? Because you left on the day of your 18th birthday to, city.
Knowing that I wanted to go to art college, I'd gone down to, I thought maybe I'd do painting in Glasgow, but then I went down to visit London and look around the art colleges there, and I just fell in love. I fell in love with London. I fell in love with the idea of going to Central St. Martin's. It was a beautiful building, and I think in the back of my mind, I knew that there was a theatre design course, but again, I didn't really know exactly what that was. I just thought, I want to be in London. I want to be in art college here. I want to paint. I want to experience a new environment. And so I applied for it and I got in. And so I knew straight away that I would like to go to London. And it just coincided that it was on my 18th birthday that I ended up having to go down there and didn't know anybody, didn't know, you know, into a big city suddenly. But I just found it really exciting. I just thought, I'm ready for this, and I want to explore a new place again. You know, it's just that I suppose I wasn't too afraid of going somewhere else. You know, that's been part of my journey as well.
Okay, so you find yourself at Central St. Martin's, and you're doing a foundation year, so which is a general training in all kinds of arts, and then you do a model on theatre.
Theatre design, yeah. So we do a 2-week model on theatre design, and I think it was Animal Farm we were given as the project, and to do it into a touring show, and it all had to fit into a van, and you had to make little models, and you had to, you know, research, do lots of research, and then draw into that research what your space might be or what the moments in the play are, and then also the character work and what they're going to look like. And that was a moment, maybe a bit of a light bulb moment where I thought, this is great. It completely combines everything that I'm interested in. It's research, which I love doing. It's you know, it can be painting, it can be sculptural, it's to do with clothes, it's to do with character and story and emotion. And they were just like, I just loved the kind of tying into the storytelling and the emotion. It just gave me, I just understood it. And so after that, I applied for the theatre degree course and did the degree in theatre design. And I think it was definitely the right choice. It's always changing. It's, you know, the actual day-to-day practicalities of the job change.
Well, I think that was
with every project.
I mean, that key thing, I think, is storytelling. Is that, you know, applying your art to storytelling, I think.
Yes. That's the thing. People, you know, have asked, you know, what your influence is and everything, but it's always about, the core of it is always what the piece is trying to say, or trying, you know, what the story of it is, and then trying to find the emotional core of it. That's what I feel like I try to do. I try to, you know, it's not just the intellectual side of it, or the surface, even the surface story. It's actually what's going on beneath for the characters, what's going on beneath in the atmosphere of the space. You know, how do you frame a person in a space to highlight some of the undercurrent themes that are going on in the story. And also the other thing with live theatre, you know, live events, I feel like you're almost like the DOP of a camera, of a film, where you're trying to train the audience's eye.
That'd be director of photography. Director of photography,
yeah. You're trying to train the audience's eye visually to tune in to that corner of the stage or that person in that moment. You know, that's also what's going on in my brain when I'm thinking about the moments of a piece of theatre, piece of storytelling.
Okay, so you've done your 3 years at Central St. Martin's, and then you get to a key moment is when you have to put theory into practice and you enter into the world of work. So you want to talk about that transition into the world of work, how it was for you?
Yeah, so that was through Central St. Martin's and doing the theatre course. You know, I enjoyed making the models. I enjoyed looking at character and drawing, and the artistic side of it I enjoyed, but I also have always been drawn to the performance side of it. You know, I used to do a little bit of acting when I was at school. That was part of my interest too. And so actually when we were leaving, one of the tutors was asking us what we, you know, how we felt about the next stage and what we were interested in. And I said, very instinctually, I said, I'm really interested in being part of something new, that's a new company that I can be in the rehearsal process with. I want my designs to kind of come out of the rehearsal process with actors and directors, and for it to be an inside-out experience of creative design. And I was really interested in that. And, you know, and I said that and didn't think that much of it, and went up to Edinburgh because my parents were in Edinburgh, and, you know, witnessed the festival and stuff like that. And I got a call from a tutor who was at LAMDA, at the acting college, and he's called Brian Asbury. And Brian Asbury, he's South African. He was the husband of Yvonne Bryceland, who was very famous for working with Athol Fugard in South Africa in the 70s. And they had been one of the first people to set up, it was called the Space Theatre, which was the first multiracial theatre company in South Africa in the 70s, which was quite a huge political thing, you know, and Athol Fugard's plays came very much out of that environment. And Brian had been part of that and now was a tutor at Lambda. And his whole philosophy was that he was trying to persuade the graduates of the drama colleges to not wait around for other people to, you know, give them work, but actually to start to look at what they were interested in as individuals, as themselves, in their age group, and actually create their own work. And so they were looking for a designer for a show that they hoped to take up to the Edinburgh Festival. And because I had said this about, you know, wanting to be part of a new company and to be, you know, so my tutor had linked us together. Yeah, that's Brian there. And so I ended up becoming the designer of this piece of theatre. And, you know, it didn't have any money for me, didn't have any money for the budgets. I had to kind of make all the costume bits myself and paper wigs and things like that. And it was a piece called The Geese, and it was actually about theatre, and it was about theatre being banned in the 17th century in Britain. And it was taken to the Richard DeMarco Gallery, which is a really great space for it to have gone, actually. And it did really well in the Edinburgh Festival, and it won an award. And it ended up kind of people beginning, you know, starting to see that they wanted to have a future life with it. So the British Council ended up sponsoring it on a tour to Romania, and then Hong Kong, and then around America. So actually in the first 2 years after college, from my little bit of conversation with my tutor saying I want to be part of this, you know, and it was very instinctual. I was just honest with myself about what I wanted to do. I wasn't trying to be, you know, obviously you think, oh, I've got to make money, I've got to blah, but actually just the core of what I was interested in, which was working with performers, was what came out my mouth. And that was the thing that then joined me to this thing, which then took me around the world for 2 years, because they didn't have any money for a set as so much. So actually what I ended up doing was creating installations in different spaces. And, you know, and it's such an interesting time. It was the year that Ceausescu had just been overthrown in Romania. They were just coming out of this huge kind of shadow of him and all his restrictions, and the play was talking about things like that. So it was just, you know, it really had echoes of their world kind of showing back up to them in this very small way, and then Hong Kong, and then America. So it was it was kind of jumping in the deep end, running away to the circus kind of thing, where you were suddenly, you know, I suddenly found myself traveling around the world with a theatre company.
Just interrupt. I think the important thing, though, is the kind of philosophy of finding like-minded people.
Yeah, and that's something that you know, I have a studio at the back of my garden. I have people who come and help me make the models and stuff like that. And you know, and I see a lot of young designers who, you know, they have all this kind of collaboration in college, and they have all this great experience of working with their contemporaries and doing exciting projects while they're at college. And then they come out and they feel lost, and they feel like they don't know how to make this a business. And I just say to them, don't worry about that. You're still really young. Find people who are the same generation as you. Find your contemporaries who spark your passions and see the world in the same way that you see the world, and make stuff together. You know, do that. And okay, you might not be able to earn too much money from that to start with, but it so feeds your life. And also, more importantly, for me, it also means that you're going to be the next generation coming through, and you're going to make theatre, or whatever form it is you're interested in exploring, the next exciting, new, current medium that it should be. You know, it doesn't need people who are older than you necessarily, who are established in the environment, to be handing you jobs that is just sitting in a structure that's everybody already knows. You know, it's about things changing, it's about things moving. And so to find other people around you that that help support each other through that, and you kind of share similar ideas because you're living in the world at the same time. You know, you've grown up in the same time environment. I just think it's the key. I think it's the key.
So, and you put that into practice because you formed a company called Wink in the early days with Rufus Norris, who
so after
the National Theatre. So
after doing touring, we came back, and Brian had sort of been talking to the next generation of students, and there was a space that was found in London in a basement called Arts Threshold. And Rufus Norris, who's now the artistic director of the National Theatre, he trained as an actor, and he had been part of this next group. And he came in and, you know, had done one of the shows acting in the space, but then decided he wanted to direct something. And it was at a moment where I was coming back off this tour, and actually was one of the only designers around in that space because it was mainly actors. But Rufus and I decided to do a show together, and then it just clicked. You know, there was just a good chemistry in terms of how we saw storytelling, how we saw the world, what we wanted to play with. So after doing 2 or 3 shows, and along with the lighting designer Natasha, we set up our own company called Wink Productions, and we had a little office at Sadler's Wells, and we would apply for funding from the London Arts Board for our projects, and we try to do 1 show a year at, you know, and at places like the Young Vic in London. But you know, we had a tiny office, and we would have to do all the admin ourselves, all the marketing, everything was done by us. And there were definitely periods of time, you know, I was probably out of college by now by maybe 3-4 years, where I would look at.
Okay, this is Rufus there.
Yeah, that's Rufus. I would look at, you know, I would wonder if I was doing the right thing. I would wonder if I was really part of the industry. You know, I'd see other designers who'd maybe become assistants to bigger designers, and I kind of felt like I was a bit of an outsider, to tell you the truth. But actually kept going because I believed, and I, you know, kept going because actually inherently in me, I like to tell stories. I get excited about putting theatre on. You know, in the group of people that were around Wink and us as contemporaries, we felt we were doing stuff. You know, we felt we were working. We felt we were doing things, but I didn't feel like it was part of the industry. And then sort of, you know, as we were building up our things, Rufus and I were also still paralleling doing, you know, I would do shows for other companies, small companies, and he was starting to get to be known in the directors, kind of London directors world. And the first time that I felt like I kind of maybe was taken into the industry a bit more was through Nancy Meckler, who had a company called Shared Experience, and she invited me to do a show at the RSC with her. And so that was the sort of first time.
So this is, you know, a very important moment, because before then you were making all your own props, all your own things, and then suddenly you look into a larger theatre company and you have makers who do things for you.
Yeah.
Having a team that work for you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when we were doing our own work, we never had a huge amount of money. So, you know, I would ask people to build bits and pieces, but a lot of it I was having to work out how to translate the idea into reality through me physically doing it, or, you know, things like that. And then suddenly at the RSC, you go in and you have like an amazing scenic department who, you know, the technology that they've got, they can build whatever you want them to build. You know, they're very, very clever people. You go into costume department, you've got makers who concentrate just on costumes for men. You have the women's department, you have dyers, you have amazing craftspeople. And so so the piece that Nancy asked me to do was this Mexican piece at the RSC, and called by a nun called Soana Inés de la Cruz, and it was quite a funny piece, but it was all sort of 17th century, and so very technical period costumes. And you know, I didn't have a huge knowledge of that, but I just did my research, and also again thought, I don't want it just to be period for the sake of it. I think always, if I keep what the story's trying to do, and that the fact that it's going to be a contemporary audience watching it, you know, I tend to take the structures and the forms of what period are, but also slightly mix it into something that feels contemporary. And so basically, I kind of ended up having to draw and then talk to all the craftspeople about what I was aiming for, and then you have these people who will make these amazing things for you. But that's a kind of learning curve in itself. How do you get your ideas over to people who are really skilled at the technical side of things? You know, when you don't necessarily, you're not meant to know all the technicalities of everything, because, you know, people do, but it's good to have a certain knowledge of it so that you can communicate, because it's about communication. It becomes about communication.
Okay, so your career, you know, you're working now with the Royal Shakespeare Company, also doing wing productions, probably also some things at the National, I'm not sure at the time. And then,
later on, yeah. Later on,
okay. And then you get the chance to do the show in New York, again with Rufus directing. Is Rufus directing?
Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Yeah,
and that works very well. Okay.
Yeah, so you know, so I'd probably maybe done 2 or 3 shows at the RSC by this point, and so I'd got really used to the mechanics of how you get all your designs out and how you give that to different people to then make. And Rufus's career was building up as well at the same time, and he had been invited to do a show in New York at the Roundabout Theatre on the Liaisons Dangereuses. And so it was quite a big deal. But in America, so in Britain, we do set and costume. A lot of people do set and costume. But in America, they divide it up. So it becomes, you either do the set or you do the costume. And he wanted somebody who he knew in his team. So he was working with an American set designer, but he didn't want, you know, he needed somebody he knew, just because it was his first big show on Broadway. So he asked if I could do the costumes. So I went over and did the costumes, and it was just one of those moments that kind of where everything, all the stars aligned in terms of the level of experience I had got to. By that point, my understanding of construction, by that point, period construction through the RSC, and also the fact that in New York, although New York Broadway is just a massive machine of shows, so many shows, but actually there's not so many period costume shows. So all these amazing costume makers in New York, you know, really all the top houses were so keen to make these costumes for this period piece, and none of them had heard of me. You know, there's big designers who work there all the time. Like, who's this person coming in to do these costumes? But so I had the pick of really good makers to make the costumes. I also had got to the point with who I was as a designer where I understood that the costumes shouldn't be just period. They were period silhouettes. They look period, but the piece itself is about sort of deceit and sexual chemistry, and you know, it's really sensual. It's a really sensual piece of work.
To interrupt you, Emilia, can you go back to that image there that you had?
I'll make it bigger. Yeah.
The first one. The one before.
That one's fine.
Oh, this one, okay.
Yeah.
And
so
just,
these are so you know, you can see that they're 17th century costumes. You can't, the set itself with this kind of mirrored space. And so I knew that the set was mirrored, and I knew that you know, always in the back of my head, I'm thinking this story is about, it's sensual, it's about people lusting after each other. The actors have to be able to move really beautifully and kind of physically in the space, but it has to feel like it's in the period, because it's of the etiquette of that period and the morals of that period, and that's what the tension is in the storytelling. So I kind of wanted to combine all those things in the way the costumes were done, and so they became, although they're very period on the outside, the way they're constructed isn't. It's like the corsetry is almost like dance corsetry, so people can move in it. The scale of the bustles, which you can't see in this so much, but they were kind of extended. So from a silhouette point of view, like the Laura Linney character was Myrto, she almost looks like an animal, because like a sort of, you know, she's got this very sort of strong silhouette to her in the space. The space is reflective. The colors that I chose and the fabrics that I chose pick the light up, and they become like these jewels in the space. And it was a moment, I mean, and I don't like boasting, but it was a moment where when the curtain went up and you saw these people, the characters in the space, and the way it reflected and the way that the fabric hit the light, you gasped, you went like that. And it totally, when I look at it now, I look at that and I look at that King and I image, and all the things I was obsessed by in that image go right into what I did in this costume and these costumes here. And they become, and it was the sensualness of the fabric which tells a story, you know. People, and Robin and I were discussing it the other day, that, you know, sometimes costume is seen as this kind of secondary cousin to set, you know, as if costume doesn't take in the same conceptual aspects as set. But actually, I think it's so not true. You know, the character is being told, the story is being told through the people and the characters in the stage, and it's that, for me, has the emotional sort of focus in it. So it's really important. It's really important that whatever the performers are doing and wearing is also kind of got all the undercurrents or the sort of essence of their emotional journey or the bigger story. And also it's very technical costume too. So, you know, and I think that was a moment with Les Liaisons Dangereuses where you could kind of subconsciously, you felt the atmosphere of the story in some of those decisions that were made through the costumes, and I think that's why it won the award.
Okay, let's talk about that. So you won a Tony Award in that moment for this costume, or your costume.
The costumes.
And just to explain, Tony Awards are is it New York or American awards for theatre?
They're American, but I suppose they focus on they're theatre, so it focuses around New York.
And it's equivalent of an Oscar, basically. So
yeah, they're the biggest theatre one that you can get in America. Yeah.
So how was that? I mean, that's one of the personal question. How was that when you won the Oscar? How, you know, that moment?
No, I didn't win an Oscar. Well, it was a bit surreal, but the whole experience of doing these costumes there was surreal because like I said, I was, you know, it was interesting that everybody wanted to work on the show because they didn't often have the opportunity to do that kind of work. So it was like the stars aligning. And then when I got nominated, it just felt like a sort of bit of a dream. And then, you know, and it was a bit of a strange dream, all of it. And even the winning of it, you know, I remember you go on to Radio City and it's this massive stage and there's just thousands of people. And I thought there would be like a podium that I could hold on to or something. There was nothing. And you're sort of suddenly standing there having to give a sort of speech. It was strange. And also, nobody had told me that you only get like 45 seconds or whatever, and you get played off if you don't go over. And I went over. So
we'll do the same here, Katrina. Don't worry.
But I do remember going up. You then get taken to a building and you meet all the press. And I remember going up and being in this room by myself, looking out the window over the skyline of New York, and just thinking, this is like a weird film. It felt like a film. It was so odd, all of it. But anyway, I mean, but then also what you realize after that, you think it's going to change your world. And then what you realize after that is just business. It's just a business, it's just a way of.
But it opens doors.
Well, it does. But it's interesting. I think, yes, it does. And when I came back, I suppose I got known as a costume designer. Suddenly, even though I'd been a set and costume designer, suddenly I was like known as a costume designer, and then got offered bigger costume shows in opera, and with people like Terry Gilliam and stuff like that. So, so it does open doors, but maybe not as many as you imagine. And also, it's still all about hard work. It's all about the work. It's not really about, you can't just sit back and go, well, I've got these awards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're moving into higher profile things, say doing with English National Opera with Terry Gilliam, working at Globe, also ballet with the Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah, so
ballet.
Sorry?
You did ballet with the Pet Shop Boys.
Well, I did that, yeah. So basically, so at the same time, so what happened after the awards was actually suddenly you are getting bigger shows, and with it, you're juggling. So I was doing two massive shows together, actually. I was doing one of Terry Gilliam's operas and the Pet Shop Boy Ballet. Now, the Pet Shop Boy Ballet came around because Javier de Frutos, who is a choreographer, had worked with Rufus and I on Cabaret that we did in the West End in 2006. And he's, became a good friend, and he's an exciting choreographer who had his own work, and he's quite he's quite out there with his work. Was very experimental.
Naples as well. He came here and he loves Naples.
Yeah, and Terry. And basically, the Pet Shop Boys wanted to do a ballet. They wanted to do the music for a ballet based on a Hans Christian Andersen story called The Most Incredible Thing. And Javier and them collaborated on that, and Javier came and asked me to do the set and costumes on it. So so we did this contemporary ballet called The Most Incredible Thing, which was on at Sadler's Wells, which again was round circle because Sadler's Wells was where I had my little office with Rufus years before, and then suddenly I'm doing the ballet on stage. So, I've done a few dance pieces, and I would like to do more. Actually, I think I love the physicality and the way that my work has to interact with the physicality.
Okay. I mean, we talk about that a little bit then. So the difference between maybe working in theater, working in ballet, working in opera. I mean, because they're very different types of performance and performers. So you have the fluidity of the dancer, and then you have the opera singer who they say parks and barks. It's not going to move.
Well, I mean, I think I've got the most experience in theatre. I think as a person, I love watching dance. I respond to movement. I find the sort of subconscious narrative of movement really interesting. And I suppose I respond least to opera. I think, for me, that's not where my heart is so much. But the thing that opera can do is I think the skills are amazing. And the level of production and big pictures you can create through opera is amazing. So, but the world of it is just instinctively I'm not so attuned to, I suppose. Okay. But dance, I would like to do more of.
Okay. So let's move into, because obviously you're working with a lot of people, let's say Pet Shop Boys, also Damon Albarn, from Blur, a collaborative piece. But anyway, it leads all up, and then you get the job with Harry Potter. So you want to tell us about that?
So all of this is, like I say, I'm juggling different projects throughout the year, usually maybe 2 or 3 overlapping, and they're quite big, and they're all different as well, which I like. So, I think just before I'd started to do more work at the National Theatre, and I'd done a few projects that were kind of Indian based, actually, the stories. And I then got invited to the West End under Sonja Friedman Productions to do a new musical based on Bend It Like Beckham. So it was sort of Anglo England, and to do the costumes for that. And that was the first time that I'd worked with Sonja, although she'd seen my work, I suppose, in other places.
Sonja's a producer.
Sonja, she's a big producer, big West End producer. And and that show did well, and it was fine. And then I got a phone call, and basically it was to see if I would meet John Tiffany to do costumes for the production of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Now, the thing is, John Tiffany, I'd known John Tiffany for years. I had never worked with him, and I had never met him. But John Tiffany grew up at the same time that Rufus and I grew up. He's of the same generation of theatre makers. And he had a very close collaboration with the choreographer Stephen Hoggart. They'd known each other since they were boys at school, and were great friends and had done a lot of work together. And I knew Stephen through work that Rufus and I had done with him, with Wink, with our theatre company. And so although John and I had never met or never worked together, when we met, it was so obvious we were of the same generation of theatre makers, and we understood how to tell stories on stage in the same way. It was that side of storytelling that we were interested in, and it was that John was interested in. He was interested in with Harry Potter, where it could be something that, obviously it needs magic in it, it needs illusion in it, where it could be all high tech and whizzy. But actually, he was much more interested in pure storytelling and using the audience's imagination to engage with how you did the moment of illusions and how you did the magic. So that the core of it was the story and the emotional story, and all the other stuff around it was how do we create, through the craft of theatre and play and imagination, the audience's and ours, how do we tell these moments of illusion? And when you see it, it's a huge piece of work. It's it's like 6 hours or 5 hours long. You see it either in 2 days or one big whole day, like an event. It's the beauty of it is that it kind of takes you on this journey. So it's almost like reading the books, because you have a very sort of direct relationship to the way it's told on stage, through the actors, through the moments of theatrical trickery, but they're all sleight of hand, and they're all human based, actually. So I think that's what makes it the piece of strong theatre that it is. And that comes directly from the type of theatre makers that John chose to work with him. And they, so Christine, who did the set, I did the costumes, Stephen did the choreography, and John, we are all of the same generation. We all made our own little theatre when we were growing up, after college. We all are people who have built our way up through small fringe work, through all of that onto this level, and I think that shows in the way that we managed to knit it together as a piece of work.
No, it's in fact. So you've come into the establishment from the fringes and literally fringe theatre, and you've become the establishment now. Really, all these like-minded people. So I mean, just get a sense of the dimension of the Harry Potter production as well, because it's global. That's for me, that's also quite exciting now, because it's I feel like what keeps you going, you're doing a lot of work, and it sucks your whole life, all of it, because
a lot of hours of work that you have to do. So you want to kind of feel like you're keeping growing in different ways. And what's become quite interesting for me now with the Harry Potter stuff is because it's simultaneously going on like in New York, San Francisco, Germany, Australia, and it has a brand to it. So you have to, it's not like each show is going to be different. Each show has a sort of stamp on it, a blueprint to it, but it's how do you reproduce that blueprint in all these different environments in a way that you've got control of, that it's going to be okay, it's going to look the way you think it's going to look. And so along with my team, I work very closely with a costume supervisor, Sabine Lemaitre, who's brilliant. And again, she's, we're old friends now. And it's that level of production. So the marrying of craft and production, I find that really fascinating now. How do you coordinate all these different makers to produce the look of everything in the way that that things are going to move how you want them to move, that the silhouettes are going to look the same, and that's there's over 500 costumes, and there's on each production, and there's also they've got illusions part, they're technical, they've got technical things built into them for things to happen to them. They're one costume 1 minute and they have to change into something else the next minute. And it's that kind of mass sort of organization and marrying the abilities and the craftsmanship of all the different people who make these things into a timeline that's getting produced, where the actors are only cast at a certain stage, so it's fascinating on a different level now. It's a sort of, and I think it marries to doing like a massive big production film where you're really having to use two parts of your brain, the creative bit and the kind of organized managerial production line of it. And obviously you have teams of people that you work with, and that's why ultimately a lot of this boils down to people. It boils down to how you communicate with people, how you build up relationships with your teams of people, so that the experience can be happy as well, a happy experience, which it is, because the people around, I always feel like we're going on an adventure together. Sabine and I always feel like we're going to strap ourselves into a roller coaster and then go for the journey. And so you have to have that trust in the people that you work with, and when you're doing these big shows, because especially with theatre, everything has to unfold in front of an audience's eye in real time. So you can't stop, and this is a very fast moving production. The scenes flow. It's like a piece of massive choreography, and yet there's lots of different characters being played by a company of 40 odd actors. So everything has to be quick, and the way it's all built in has to be part of how you do it all.
Okay, and you obviously won an Olivier Award for this, which is the British equivalent of the Tony Award, and you won another Tony Award for this as well. So
yeah, I think
was that a different experience winning your second Tony Award?
I think what you realize is that the show obviously is a really good piece of theatre, and I think it won the most awards for a show, the Oliviers anyway. No, I mean, it's great to be recognised and to be, because you're always up against other really good people. So it is an honour to get it. I suppose it's also business. It is also business.
It's a very powerful behind it.
Yeah, but it's I think it's won for the right reasons, because it is a good piece of theatre.
Okay, and I mean, this leads us up to contemporary times, the pandemic, and so the theatre is in crisis. So tell us about that, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's so sort of strange, isn't it? Who would have believed that we could be in this situation where the world is completely, closed, and that actually the virus itself hits at exactly what we do, which is gather people, which, so it's very hard. It's been a strange time for the business that I work in, and unknown, it's been quite unknown. It's still slightly unknown. I do believe eventually we'll all get on top of all of this, and theatre will, I think people's need for live events is really still there, and theatre will need to be able to, I think people will want to go to theatre and tell stories, and hopefully there's other forms that will come out of it. I think there's been in Britain, within the theatre community, there's been quite a lot of coming together and advocacy around this whole moment. So we've tried to support each other through it, and also the people who are in the earlier stages of their career or emerging, who really, they haven't even had the chance to kind of get into it yet, and suddenly they're in this environment where everything's closed. So there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of advocacy, there's a lot of looking at old structures and how to break them down a bit and make the whole environment feel more aspirational on some levels and more inclusive, definitely. So there's a lot going on.
Responding to Black Lives Matters in a way as well. That same conversation, at the same time as the pandemic and Black Lives Matters, I think.
Well, yeah, last year. I mean, this time last year. So a lot of us designers came together and had just started kind of talking about how to help support other people in our field, through this moment, and then Black Lives happened as well, and it just felt like we were in this time where a lot of the old structures and a lot of the old ways that we had been living needed to be cracked open and looked at more clearly, and more honestly about, and so that's definitely, that last year was a sort of whirlwind of all of that, and it's now starting to kind of build into, hopefully, definitely it's built into conversations and hopefully actions which will help to make the environments that we all work in feel a bit more balanced and fair and inclusive. Yeah.
Okay. I have some questions for your working process I'd like to go into a bit later, but if there's open up to any questions at this point. So we've done the whole kind of chronology of your working life and also your own life as a person. So are there any people with any questions that would like to ask? Feel free to ask a question.
Always a moment of
I know, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, there's Laurie. Hello. My colleague Laurie. Laurie, you want to ask a question?
Hello, I'm Robin's colleague. I always knew he had an accomplished sister, but I never realized what a lovely, unassuming person you were. I've just been hanging on to every word. It's a real treat to hear all about your your professional growth, and I wish you lots of success in the future. I can only say it's a bit harder for kids. I don't know, it was a different time. There seemed to be more opportunities, but you make things sound possible. So it's been a real pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would be interested to hear from any of the students about, the environment that they're growing up in terms of that thing that I was saying about being able to connect with your contemporaries. Do you feel you've got opportunities where you can explore your thoughts, your ideas? Are you, have you got the energy for that? It's quite, there's a lot. And also I think the thing to remember is you might not feel it, I don't know, but that there's a big life ahead, and also that do everything at once. It's all stepping stones. And even now, you know, even now in my life, I think, okay, I've reached this level where I can make a living out of what I do. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm traveling. I'm working in big shows. Everything's different. I've got great teams of people. Bam! Suddenly the virus happens. You never know what's going to happen around the corner. So, you know, suddenly I'm back to square one, maybe in some ways. And so what I'm saying is that you can't do it all at once. You can never plan it as a whole thing. You can only plan stages of it or bits of it that you are interested in. And I think that's the key. You have to find the thing that is you. And I think we always feel that it's all about what's outside, but actually it's the opposite. It's all about what's inside. It's all about what's inside you, you know?
Okay, I have a question then. So you also have a very successful career and things worked out reasonably well. If you could go back in time, is there anything you would change?
Well, yes. What would I change? I think it's that thing of being a bit bolder, maybe. You know, it's taken time to get to a certain point, and you know, I look back and I think, why was I so worried about bits and bobs? I should have just done my own stuff at that point, or you know, explored this thing that I was interested in at that point. But you know, but then I also look back and I think, well, what I've managed to do, I think, is juggle. I've managed to juggle. How do you be a creative person and still try to survive as a, you know, on a human level? How do you survive just being able to pay your rent, being able to feel, you know? So you know, I've spent many years juggling that, and then that flipping into sort of being able to juggle it on a level where it wasn't so much about survival, but more about exploring and building forward. But even when I was in the survival stage, the early stages of not earning any money, or you know, I was still very happy because of the kind of strength of what was building up around, you know, what I was building up with the other people around me. So, but maybe having been to art college, maybe there's a sort of level of artistic exploration that theatre doesn't always allow you to completely have, because it's collaborative, you know, and because you are working with others, and there is a slight conservatism in form in Britain. You know, it's quite script based, whereas, you know, I don't think story necessarily always has to be script based, but it is in Britain. And so maybe there's a sort of, I like to think that I'm kind of more experimental than actually probably you see. Like, if I wish I could show you the PowerPoint, but
you'd like to show some images, Katrina. Maybe.
Well, so when I go to present now,
and you have to present your screen,
entire screen, and yeah, I've got that, and then but it won't let me share you.
Well, maybe don't do entire screen. There's two options, I think.
Choose what I'd like to share. Hang on, let me see. I might be able to do it.
Robin, we have a question from a student. It's in the chat.
In the chat. Okay. Hold on a sec. Let's get to the chat. Okay. I think this is the question. I'm sorry, I'd like to speak, but I cannot. Okay. Okay. From an article I read, you kept a gold gown worn by Laura Linney.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I think one of the ones you saw earlier.
Oh, really?
Did you see my screen?
No.
Sorry. Yes. So basically, I kept one of the gold gowns that Laura Linney wore for Les Liaisons Dangereuses, and I kept one of the embroidered coats that what was his name? The actor. Oh, he's famous too. I can't remember his name. Anyway, I kept one of those because I was just you know, I didn't know what was going to happen to these costumes. I think actually a museum bought some of them, but they were just going to get thrown away.
You have some costumes in the V&A Museum in London.
Yes, so there's the Damon Albarn musical, which was based on Alice in Wonderland. They're doing a whole big Alice in Wonderland exhibition at the V&A, which was meant to come out last summer, but is coming out hopefully this summer. And they've asked to use 2 of my costumes. So a version of an Alice costume that I did and the White Rabbit, which are they're very, I wish I could show my screen. I'm really sorry. When we did it the other day, it seemed to work, but I just can't seem to get it to work. Yes, so 2 of those are now in the V&A, which is quite nice. But I haven't managed to see them there yet because I haven't been able to.
Okay.
Anyway. Hang on, I think I've got it.
Okay, fingers crossed.
Hang on. Can you see my screen?
No.
Oh.
Okay, I mean, I know Katrina's work, and her drawings. I mean, she's a wonderful drawer of figures and costumes, and in her sketches, and then obviously what they make. So it is a real shame we can't see some of these images, because I saw them the other day, and also I'm familiar with Katrina's work. We're almost running out of time, Katrina. So the last question I'd like to ask you is, the future. Then, what would you like to do in the future?
I don't know, because we're in such a sort of strange time, aren't we? I am thinking about it quite a lot, and I think I had, I'm in a very lucky position in that I'd managed to reach a level where I get offered work and I can carry on working. But I also was starting to feel like I was repeating the rhythm of my life a little bit, shows after show at the National, which is great. But so I started to kind of wonder, I don't know what's next, but I'm sure it will evolve. Something will evolve. Yes, that's the Alice exhibition. I've got some projects coming up, which, touch wood, hopefully will happen, as we get out of this pandemic. The Harry Potter stuff is still going on, touch wood, as we get out of this pandemic. And I've got shows that are meant to open in Broadway as well. So a lot of my work's just in suspension at the moment. But, I have a little notebook at home where I kind of write down thoughts of ideas that I would want to explore by myself, or with a group, that I would be the kind of leader of it. So I don't know if I sometimes I have the time and energy for it, and sometimes I think, do I have the time and energy for it? But I think the way I like to work anyway, and as a designer, it's always collaborative, but you're also a lot of the time coming up with the sort of visual dramaturgy even before the director's involved, So there's a lot of thoughts and staging thoughts that you have early on, and sometimes I think I'd like to just explore those through my own.
Robin, someone raised their hands.
Okay. I can't. Sorry, I didn't see that. I have to go on to this. Okay, that's who wrote that.
There's some rumors of a movie version. I think so, but I'm not sure if that's. I don't know much about it. It would be it's controlled by Warner Brother, I think. That
we have a question from Juliana. So Juliana, you want to ask your question?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning. My question is, how do you deal with details? I mean, how do you work with details without getting lost in the process?
Good question. How do you do it? Well, I mean, I think it's like excavating or sifting through things. I like to, understand. There's always something that I'm trying to get from something, which is to do with the emotion or the feeling, rather than necessarily even just a visual. I'm trying to understand what the feeling is of things, of the story, of the character, of the moment, or of the space, what the atmosphere is. And so once I kind of get a little hook of what that is, I probably go on this massive journey of just looking at images and images and images, and every sort of different for books, internet, out the window, you know, whatever. And it will be, I'll suddenly see something. I think that's got something I'm looking for. You know, I'm looking for hints all the time of the things that I'm looking for, and so I start collecting them. And I don't know if other people do it like this, but I collect a lot, and then I just sort of let it. I look a lot. I look, and I might be listening to something while I'm looking. It's going back to that whole king and I thing in a funny way, is that I allow these things to kind of absorb inside me, and I don't want to, in a way, I want to be a bit like that child again. I don't want to be an adult making big intellectual decisions about it. I want to be more innocent and open to it. So I collect a lot of imagery, and I sift and I sift, and then I do find when I'm drawing, I'll have all my imagery in front of me, and then I'll start drawing, and I'm rubbing out a lot, and I'm drawing and I'm rubbing out a lot, and through that process of action, things start. I go, oh no, that's what I'm looking for. That's the shape of it. And then you start adding the detail into that. So it's layers and layers. Or there might be a moment where something, you know, a bit of something has a detail in it that actually completely captures. You know, you could see how it would move when somebody falls, and that says something to you about the story. So it's about the layering of things and you know, excavating things, but everybody will have their own different way of doing it, you know, and some people the detail might be the first thing that is the thing, you know. So I think I'm quite painterly in some ways, and I think that's also part of my aesthetic. Is I quite like doing all the broad brush strokes, kind of getting the whole thing in, and then going into the detail of it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Giada Iacoletti in the chat.
Okay. Okay, Giada, there's rumors about a movie version of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Is that true?
I don't know. It might be. I've heard it as well, but it's more to do with Warner Brothers than it is to do with the stage production, possibly. I don't know. I actually don't know more than that.
Okay. We have a question from Federica, and she'd like to know about your approach is different when designing costumes for an historical or contemporary setting, and what kind of performance do you consider more challenging for your work? So play or ballet, etc.
I think my approach, I mean, with historical costume, you have to understand the references of how things are made, and you know, the sort of detail of the construction in a way that you don't with contemporary clothes. But again, I go back to the character and the story being the essential element of it, because even with you know, as a designer and as a theatre maker, I'm not making historical costumes that will go in a museum. I'm making them to go on a person who's telling a story or being a character. So my approach isn't necessarily different. I just think there's a layer of research that I'm doing a bit more when I'm doing the historical one, because I'm learning a bit more about how things are constructed in a certain way. And the more challenging work, play, ballet. I don't know. I think actually live stuff I like play and ballet, I think are probably as challenging to me as each other, depending on what the pieces are. I'm just trying to think sometimes, like, you know, I've done a little bit of concert work with Mika, and I've done a little bit of film work, and sometimes I find them a little bit more challenging because of the speed, the time. I'm not so used to the timeline on it, and also as a designer for live events, I understand how I'm trying to make the visual work from an audience's point of view. But with film, you know, as a production designer, it's much more the director of photography who's doing that. So, you know, it's just understanding the mechanics of the actual different forms. But I think between play and ballet, I feel like they're fairly similar in some way. I mean, obviously there's a difference because of the physicality of dance, but that's I know a bit more about that.
Okay. Laurie, I see your hand is up. Do you have another question, Laurie?
I'm sorry, I forgot to take it away. I don't. Sorry, I'm listening to every word though.
Okay. Emilia, I think we're running out of time. So maybe the last question, Katrina, is just to, again, reiterate what advice you would give to students at this stage in their career.
I think trust yourself. I think that's a really big one, and I think that's very hard, you know, to understand maybe when you're starting out. But I think really trust yourself and follow the things that make you feel passionate about. Connect up with people who you feel have the same, or you know, have something in the way that they look at the world that you find interesting, or that you find similar, a similar expression. That don't worry about the situation that we're in. You know, it's tricky, but it will shift, and there's going to be lots of possibilities. And what's exciting is what your generation or what you lot are all going to bring to it all. You know. Yeah,
I mean, you often speak about, you know, being in a tribe. Find your tribe.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Find your tribe, definitely. You know, and really enjoy that. You know, that's what it should be enjoyable. You know, anything creative or artistic is an expression, and it's an expression of life. So, you know, just go for it. I think don't worry too much.
So I think we're running out of time. If we had music, we'd start playing music over your speech.
I would still be thanking people.
I've seen 3 of your speeches, and they've all been played over.
I haven't mastered that at all. I'm really sorry I couldn't present the imagery. I'm really sorry about that.
Okay. Maybe we could send it, Katrina, and people could access it. You know.
Yeah, try and work that one out.
After the lesson, we could put it onto a classroom or something like this. Yeah. So, Emilia, or Stefania, do you have any last words? I'll hand over to you, Emilia.
As all the people know, I am attracted by Harry Potter. Just because, you know, I am also a fond of this adventures in Wonderland, and I was thinking about you know, Harry Potter costume designing involvement, and I don't know whether you know, but I think that this is a way to get a wider audience. And I mean, you are a crossover costume designer because you went beyond the age and cultural boundaries. And this is a very, very important step in your life. And also personally, as a person, because I think that you got younger and younger while working on Harry Potter. And I was also thinking about asking you, are you a Potter follower? I mean, do you like Potter?
I'm not like a massive fan like some people, you know. I'm an older generation. I think the people that really got into the books are maybe in their 30s, 40s now, and I think I was older than that. So I missed that kind of whole phenomenon about the books, really. But my daughter, who never used to read much when she was little, we went on a holiday when she was 8, and we bought her the book to read, and she suddenly just completely started devouring them. I mean, and she's an avid reader now. I think very much because of those books, you know, they just caught her imagination, and she just completely went in it. So through her, I started to understand the world of it more, and then obviously watched the films and stuff like that. And then when the job came, I listened to them. So basically, as I was drawing, I was listening to because I didn't have time to read them all. I was listening to them all when I was drawing, and so understood them through my daughter and through her passion for them, and through then listening to them later, and through the storytelling of the show. So I've got a huge admiration for them, and also doing the research as I was doing the production, just the level of backstory and depth of the universe that J.K. Rowling has built is massive. It was what I was doing, was trying to look at all the the kind of threads of all the journeys of all the different characters, and kind of realizing just that she had thought about all of it. It's very well. I can't remember exactly what her background is in terms of what she studied, but you can see it in her writing and the level of kind of connection that she's put in the stories and the characters. It's really detailed and it's really deep. So I responded to that. So I thought that, I could see that, the more talking about excavating, the more you excavate, the more you discover about it. So, yeah.
And how was she to work with? Was she present in the rehearsals?
She was there. Yeah, she was there at the beginning. I mean, what was brilliant about the whole piece, and I would say Sonia as a producer was, once John had kind of built the team around him, and we all, the script and the story were evolving through workshops in the year before, but then also a little bit through the rehearsal process. But like some producers might be on your back all the time and need to see every single drawing that you do or every single detail that you do. But actually, Sonia and Colin, the producers, they trusted us. They trusted who we were as theatre makers, and that that we would put something together that that John felt was working, and that was a really, because it was slightly terrifying, every morning going into rehearsals thinking, oh God, the whole world is going to watch this when it comes out, and making sure that we knew exactly the different stages of what was needing to be done on stage. So it was nerve-wracking, but also it was really it felt supportive. It felt like you were trusted, and therefore you could just do your best job, really.
Well, I think students have 100 classes, so time is over, but I want to thank you for being back to Naples.
Yeah.
You are in Naples now, so we really thank you, and I think Emilia has some words.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Katrina and Robin.
Yes.
Like Stefania, I'm really grateful, and I'm sure all of the students are too, and all the colleagues watching the seminar in this room or on Facebook. Thank you for taking us on this fascinating journey into the birth of your creative genius. You've left many young people with precious seeds today. And we, Stefania and I, and as their teachers, sincerely hope these seeds take root. We wish them every success with their future careers, and we hope your career continues to prosper, and we look forward to seeing your new creations in person at the end of this pandemic, and to seeing you here in Naples next time.
Yeah.
Until next time, and maybe we can show the video of your acceptance speech.
Oh, no.
No? What do you think?
Nice. I like it.
Oh,
Yeah?
no.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
okay. No.
This thing.
Oh, no, this is terrible.
No.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, and I hope it's. I'm really sorry about the visuals, but and I hope I hope it was insightful for people.
It was indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Good.
Oh, this is the video.
I can't believe how lucky I am really to do this
I get-
for a living. To be able to design costumes for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and then also bring it to Broadway. It's just, it's just a massive privilege. And the most kind of interesting and exciting thing about doing this piece was the level of collaboration and teamwork involved. So, and it came from the producers right through to all the creative team and everybody on board. So, it really is what makes it a very unique piece. And my work wouldn't be anything without people who really are so talented and dedicated putting it on. So I just want to thank those. And firstly, Sabine and Carol, who are always with me. And they're always, they're making sure that my work looks the best it can on stage. All the brilliant crafts makers and costumiers who make my stuff, and from Britain and also here in America, Artours, Ariel and Tricorn. The costume team here, Rachel, Dana and Rachel.
That was me.
And this is our applause.
Horrible.
Applause for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katrina.
Thank you. Look, is that us finished? Yes.
There's one last word, Emilia. I have another sister too, who's very talented. So next time I'll bring my other sister.
Yes, please do.
Oh, she is. She's not. Okay.
So we wait for the other sister.
Yeah, sure. Grazie ai tecnici, grazie Quirino.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Katrina.
Bye.
Thank you, Robert.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci Oreste, grazie.
Bye.
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 Bye.